2 Saturdays left in the regular season. I am Bobby Broyles along with Tim McDonald with This Week in CA Football presented by Geico. Tim, it still remains tight at the top of the league race after last week's results, headlined by Elon and Stony Brook staying in the hunt for a regular season title after thrilling overtime wins at home.
It seems like we're getting OT games every week now.
Yeah.
Right behind undefeated and number 1 James Madison. Don't forget about Elon and Stony Brook. Both of them got it done in overtime in clutch fashion. Somehow, some way, the Phoenix won their 8th straight on homecoming nonetheless, beating Towson in double overtime. I mean, 33-30. Fans are going nuts. It's a little bit misty. It's a little bit crazy.
Yep.
Elon trailed 10-0, okay? Then scored 27 unanswered and held on from a 17-point Towson fourth quarter before freshman Owen Johnson booted the game winner to keep the streak alive. With 8 wins and a 6-0 mark in CAA play, the Phoenix put themselves in great position with 2 huge games left in the regular season. New Hampshire this weekend and versus JMU next Saturday. The Seawolves reclaimed the Golden Apple with a 28-21 overtime win over Albany, moving to 7-2 overall, thanks in part to Harrison Jackson's touchdown catch and a late defensive stand, knocking down a pass attempt from Will Brunson that sealed the victory. Obviously, that apple was lifted and the Seawolves were going crazy. You know how much that one meant to them. That noon kickoff in Rhode Island related to a slow start and a 7-3 halftime lead for JMU, but then things quickly changed in the second half. 31 points for a 38-3 win. Brian Shore tossed 4 touchdowns, and the Dukes incredibly won their 21st straight game overall and set a new CAA record all-time, 16 consecutive league wins, passing UMass in the 1960s, which owned the previous record. Obviously, a very long time ago and a remarkable streak to add to the overall streak. Ridiculous. But around the rest of the league, Delaware and UNH and Richmond earned big wins to keep at-large berths alive for the time being. We'll get into it, but the Blue Hens picked up a tough road victory in Portland over Maine, 31-17 for their first win in the state of Maine since 2009, first win in the series versus Maine since 2010. New Hampshire totaled a season-high 511 yards of offense, 406 through the air as Trevor Knight passed for 4 touchdowns to 4 different players to help the Wildcats win in Williamsburg for the first time since 1998. And finally, Richmond shut out Villanova in Philly, 22-0, second straight year, giving up only 163 total yards of offense, not allowing a point against the Wildcats for the second straight season, and the second time in the last 164 games. We're now 11 days away from Selection Sunday, and just 14 total games remain. You know I'm a big numbers stats guy. You know I love it. Yes, you are. With 11 games left to play remaining just in conference season alone. So down the second half and the latter half of this regular season, anything can happen on any Saturday.
Yeah, we know you'll be glued next 2 Saturdays.
It's Christmas come early.
Exactly. This time of the year always brings some decisive matchups, including this Saturday with 5 league games and a pair of non-conference contests as well. Let's first start in Kingston again at noon as Rhode Island hosts Villanova. Both squads are searching for some momentum here down the home stretch of the regular season.
Absolutely, but strange, manageable, but strange first half deficits a week ago for both the Spiders and the Rams. Kept the possibility of a win within striking distance, and second half starts, things are still close. But each team didn't find much success at all in offense in the second half of those games, leading to defeats that probably looked a lot worse than what the story told, that final result. Villanova fumbled inside its own 5-yard line on its first drive of the game against Richmond, probably their best chance to score, and then trailed 8-0 at the break before the 22-0 shutout loss, and Rhode limited JMU to 7 first-half points and 105 total yards of offense before allowing 31 second-half points. So it just gives you an idea. Managed just 39 total rushing yards in that loss. The final home game of the season for Rhode Island before closing at Towson next weekend brings another opportunity to try and put together a complete and full effort across the board if you're the Rams right now. Nova is 8th in scoring with 21 points. Rhode is 9th with nearly the same per-game average. Wildcat starter Kyle McCloskey had 6 completions on 17 attempts last weekend, and the rush game only had 73 yards on its own as well. The Wildcat Rush D still carries a chip on his shoulder as the CAA leader, one of the FCS national leaders, which could give Rhode some problems up front and probably will. But especially after the Rams were sacked 7 times a week ago for 52 yards, and it's been tough sledding, no doubt, over the last few weeks for both of these teams. The first 3-game losing skid, I should say, for Nova since 2013, while Rhode looks to win 2 games at home for the first time since 2013 as well.
After moving into the top 15 in both polls this week, Stony Brook hosts Wagner at 1 o'clock following that rivalry win over Albany. A win here, Tim, on Senior Day makes the playoff picture clear for the Seawolves.
The third straight win for the Seawolves continued to add to that resume and built that resume. Like you said, the picture becomes clear. You got to take care of business at home first. In 2017, 7-2 overall. 6-1 in CAA play with only one game remaining at Maine next weekend after this one. That's in league play, obviously. And I'm sure the win was that much sweeter for Stony Brook simply because it came versus the Danes, but it's also the way in which the Seawolves responded throughout that impressed me the most. Quickly shrunk to a 21-21 tie after a 19-play, 9-minute drive that Albany used to force overtime. You're thinking, here you never know what can happen in overtime. The panic didn't set in. The offense did its job and then said, all right, we'll let the defense, Stony Brook D, finished it out with the rest down the way with a fourth down stop. And it's been a constant theme so far for this team wrapping up non-conference play at home against Wagner, a Wagner team that's coming in struggling a little bit. But Stacey Bedell became the second player in program history to score at least 30 touchdowns on the ground in his career. He has scored his 7th of the year in that win, potentially the final home game of his career. I think that also kind of factors in. It's a lot of senior game atmospheres this weekend, which I do think actually makes a difference sometimes. Then you look at Joe Carbone, strictly by stats, over 1,600 yards passing, 16 touchdowns versus 3 picks this season. His play alone has been underrated and a large role in that offensive new kind of style production that we've seen in the Seawolves this year. In recent seasons, we've seen some close and some disappointing outcomes and ends with Stony Brook in out-of-conference play, but there's no time to mess around, especially when you're so close to knocking finally on that playoff door. Wagner out of the Northeast Conference is 3-6 on the year, snapped a 3-game losing streak with a home win over Robert Morris last weekend, but has gone 0-4 on the road this season. It's a short trip, and 2 New York teams. It's a short trip for the Seahawks, but you have to believe the Seawolves are going to be geared up and ready to keep things rolling without looking ahead to their trip to Orono next Saturday.
At 2 o'clock, our CA football game of the week on College Sports Live takes place in Williamsburg as Towson travels to William & Mary. The Tigers are playing their best football of the year the last 2 weeks, Tim.
Really turned it up a notch, especially on offense, and absolutely fair to say that, considering the sense of urgency against two really good teams. Yeah. It's not like they're doing this against random middle-of-the-pack teams. They're doing this against some pretty good competition. A year ago, the Tigers were in a similar spot against the Tribe in a game that at that time also didn't technically have that much of an impact on the standings and won 34-24 at home. After 5 straight weeks of playing ranked teams, Towson's 30 points scored at Elon in that double overtime loss where it's most scored all season. Ryan Stover had over 300 yards passing for the first time in his career, and the Tigers fought back. From that 17-point hole, all of a sudden they tie it up late, 17-point deficit in the fourth. Tigers kicker Aiden O'Neill has made a field goal in 13 straight games and needs 2 more to become the all-time program leader. You can bet he's probably going to have a field goal this week if he's done it in 13 straight. It's easy for us to sit here and talk about the Tribe and what they need to do differently. We're just sitting in studio. These guys are out here playing. And how they can turn things around during a 7-game losing skid. But there were some positives offensively in that loss to New Hampshire. You miss a field goal right before the half that would have changed the momentum of that game. A couple of drives that weren't finished. Tommy McKee had 272 yards passing and 79 rushing with 2 scores, and William Mary actually outrushed the Wildcats in total yardage. But the pass defense gave up over 400 yards through the air, as mentioned, which took away any shots of being able to stay close and answer those matches from New Hampshire. A wise person once told me never underestimate the power of a senior playing in his final home game. I think that might have an impact at Zabel Stadium on Saturday. I also believe, though, at the same time, both of these teams will pull out all they have on offense in a potentially, I think it has a potential to be a high-scoring affair.
Also at 2, a huge game on Fox College Sports Atlantic and Fox Sports Go as Elon travels to Durham to take on New Hampshire. If it involves the Phoenix this year, Tim, you know there will be an exciting finish.
No doubt. Cardiac down the stretch. It's been absolutely. If you're a fan for the Phoenix right now, you love it, but you're also like, oh my God, what's going on? The final home game for the Wildcats will be the latest and the largest test to face. And the highest-ranked opponent, by the way, to visit since JMU visited a year ago. Since 2010, New Hampshire has lost a total of 4 conference home games and enters averaging 34 points per game at Wildcat Stadium in 2017 alone. Saturday's forecast right now shows a balmy high of 38 degrees. Both teams, I think it's fair to say, whether you're Elon, still remain undefeated in conference play, whether you're New Hampshire, you need this one equally, without question. Davis Cheek is averaging 225 yards per game and 65% completion in CAA play this season for Elon. But what makes this offense so tough to defend is that constant threat, and we've talked about it multiple times. No one has answered a capable and constant run game. Deshaun McNair and Braylon Cyphers each went over 100 yards last week and scored once in the win over Towson, giving the Phoenix their first 100-yard rushing duo since 2009. The offense itself has rushed for over 100 yards in every game this season, including the Toledo loss to start the year. While Cheek has only had time and had plenty of room, Elon is tied right now for first in the CAA, allowing only 15 sacks all year long. Trevor Knight bounced back nicely from completing 10 passes in a loss to JMU to now completing 25 for 406 yards and 4 scores at William Mary last weekend. Outside of another ridiculous showing from Neil O'Connor, kind of just him and Josh Mack. You know they're going to get their yards. You just got to deal with it at this point. Who's now over 1,000 yards receiving on the year. UNH became the first team since Virginia in Week 1 to throw for more than 1 touchdown versus the Tribe this season. Whether it's special teams, whether it's key stops or turnovers, however you want to put it, Elon's ability to find a way to win has been hard to ignore. The Phoenix's average margin of victory has been just a hair under 4 points, and no matter the difference in style for pulling out a win, that to me has been remarkable and impressive this whole time. Both quarterbacks have their own red zone weapons, and Elon's Trey Marsh only has 6 catches, 4 of them for touchdowns this year. New Hampshire has Nick Lorden, 7 catches, 5 of them have been for touchdowns. Both teams have that similar type of bend but not break defense, and I think that could come into play. This should also be, I think, a heck of a Week 11 matchup that will play a role in the conference title race regardless of who wins.
At 3:30 on Comcast Sportsnet and SNY, Delaware welcomes you Albany. The Blue Hens still in the at-large picture for the playoffs, Tim, and a win here could help their body of work even more.
2 nice little tidbits from our friends over at Delaware. After the win in Portland over the Black Bears, Coach Danny Rocco is now 3-0 on the season in games following a loss, and the win secured Delaware its first winning season since 2015, which, by the way, is also the 12th consecutive winning season for Danny Rocco over his entire coaching career. Wow. We always highlighted that coming in, but he just finds a way to kind of get it. I know there's still a lot to prove for the Blue Hens. Special teams drama helped Delaware take that lead for good over Maine last week. Colby Reeder picked up a fumbled punt and dove into the end zone, seemingly breaking open that game 24-17 early in the fourth quarter. Brother Troy Reeder was named Defensive Player of the Week after a monster outing, 17 total tackles, 1 for loss, a blocked punt in the 31-17 victory. And you heard me talk about the Danes earlier already today. I know we've kind of mentioned it, but dealing with their 5th straight loss, 2nd overtime defeat in 2017, Albany battled back well and showed some guts in that loss to Stony Brook, especially late. But the first two first quarter fumbles ultimately came down and came back and haunted the Danes a little bit and cost the Great Danes that game. If they didn't turn that ball over in the first quarter, it could have been a different outcome. Will Brunson was efficient, 23 completions to 8 different receivers, and he's going to need that same type of output again versus a very stout Delaware secondary. Nasir Adderley in the second half has been the best shutdown quarter in CAA football, arguably. A year ago, Delaware scored 26 unanswered at Bob Ford Field to steal the win from the Danes, and New Albany's last trip to Newark in 2015 resulted in a road win. So you kind of get the picture and you get the idea of what the road team has done in the past during this series. Back-to-back weeks of J.P. Caruso completing just 6 passes under center. Keep an eye on how Delaware decides to use Joe Walker. Remember, don't forget about Joe Walker. Last week, he did a little bit of everything, throwing, catching, and rushing, and he really added a spark off the bench, so keep an eye on him as well.
Also at 3:30 on Masson 2 and CA.TV, the now unanimous #1 team in the country, the JMU Dukes, take on rival Richmond in Bridgeforth. A conference title possibly on the line for the Dukes, but a win for the Spiders could put them right back in the at-large category for the postseason.
In the latest installment of this series, is there any doubt at this point in the season that the stakes are going to be high, are going to be on the line? No, there's no question at all. But the 35th meeting on Saturday sees the Spiders actually controlling their own destiny at 5-4 overall right now. And by the way, actually owns a 9-7 advantage in the series in games played in Harrisonburg. JMU, of course, takes that 21-game winning streak back home after dominating in that second half at Rhode and enters having the top scoring defense in the FCS, failing to allow more than 14 points or 300 yards of total offense allowed versus FCS foes this year. So the yards are going to be there. You got to capitalize against this team. And the Spiders stifled Villanova in their shutout win last Saturday, rushing for their most yards in a game since Week 3 with 175 and finishing with 434 total yards in all. On paper and up to this point in the season, Richmond's passing attack is the best JMU will have faced this far. A 358 passing a game and a CAA best 26 touchdowns from Kyle Auletta. Didn't have one last week, but added another threat with his running attack, also scored on the ground. Something has to give with JMU's #1 rushing offense versus a Spider defense giving up 173 yards per game on the ground, good for 11th in the league. The Duke's senior class now plays its 50th game this Saturday and has lost just 4 CAA games total during their time in Harrisonburg. Of course, Madison likely is going to play at home again. You know, not going to sit here and jinx things, but of course they might play at home again this season, but there are plenty of emotions outside of playing your rival that I think could impact both teams nearly and equally in this one. With everything on the line for Richmond, knowing it needs to win out for any shot at the playoffs, these are the types of games that you sign up for. This is why you play college football. Kyle Auletta has thrown for over 400 yards each of the last two meetings. Remember last year's back and forth affair, how good of a game that was. He's combined for 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions during the last two meetings. Plenty of fans on both sides remember the 47-43 win for JMU at Richmond a year ago. The difference to me relates to how well the Dukes play at home, especially over the last 2 seasons, and how both sides of the ball continue to pick up the other when things aren't working out. I think that's the ultimate difference.
And wrap up Week 11 at 4 o'clock on Nesson Plus with Maine taking on former conference rival UMass at Fenway Park. Pretty neat opportunity here for the Black Bears, being able to play, a game in Boston. I believe the Red Sox play there.
Yeah, some
baseball
team up there, some team.
Yeah.
Unbelievable chance to be a part of the Fenway Gridiron Series, featuring 3 Division I games alone this month in the heart of Boston. If you've never seen Fenway, if you've never been there, it's literally right downtown in the city.
Yep.
Dartmouth and Brown play on Friday night. Boston College plays UConn the following weekend, and Maine obviously taking on UMass this Saturday. Supposed to be the second FBS contest of the year for Maine, but the UCF game was rescheduled due to Hurricane Irma. The atmosphere and the lore of Fenway for many players on both sides has deep New England roots. Trust me, a lot of these kids grow up playing the Red Sox, thinking about what it would be like to step on that field. The Black Bears saw their 3-game winning streak come to an end with that loss to Delaware last weekend, despite totaling 451 yards. Josh Mack got his numbers and then some, rushing for 173, but that special teams miscue that we talk about swung things the other way towards defeat to move to 4-4 on the year for the Black Bears. Former league member UMass is now an FBS independent, as now has had some adjustments and a little bit of struggles moving up to the FBS, 2-7 overall, coming in with wins over Georgia Southern and Appalachian State. Ironically enough for you FCS fans out there, the only 2 wins are former FCS teams. It's just bizarre. But throughout the records for both of these teams, there's still some old rivalry and some chippiness between these 2 programs. Both recruit against each other. Both obviously share a long history of football. UMass, obviously being in NCAA football in the past, it has that long history. Averages 29 points and over 430 yards of offense. No easy task to stop right away, despite their 2-7 record. The home of the Boston Patriots from 1963 to 68. Football is nothing new to Fenway Park, and the bragging rights that a win could bring will go a long way down the road for both of these teams, even for CAA football fans. I mean, I'd still be going in with a chip, and I do right now. I still got a chip rooting for Maine in this one, and it goes way back, but there's no better setting and matchup to end Week 11.
Don't forget to visit casports.com/live scores for all 7 of Saturday's games and even more coverage. And after a week off from the Yak, Tim, we should be back on track this week, right? We had some fall championships.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Sometimes good things get better over a quick little break, and the Yak will be back this time around on Friday, and you can listen and find CAA Football's official podcast on iTunes and on SoundCloud. Just search CAA Football. Join the conversation on social media as well this weekend, following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram using our hashtag CAAFB.
Good luck to every team this weekend. Enjoy the games, everybody.